we're going to spend most of today's episode playing a little game where Steven is going to give me a name of a player and I'm going to fit them with a trading team that I think should acquire them. And then we will talk a little bit of news. I think when we started talking about doing this episode, Mecole Hardman was still on the Jets. He's now been traded to the Chiefs. We can talk about that for a second. Roger Goodell contract extension. Jalen Ramsey back at Dolphins practice. We will hit those news items and a little bit of Thursday Night Football later on in this episode. But let's do some projected trades. Do you want to kick us off with the first player, Steven?
Yeah, let's talk about Brian Burns. He was the most impressive player I watched over the last couple of days. He's playing on a fifth-year option, which complicates matters a little bit because you're going to have to give him a new contract. That's partly why he might be available, is because Carolina doesn't seem too eager to give him a contract, which, like, for me, that's more a Carolina thing than a Brian Burns thing. I wouldn't hold that against them. And this is the second straight trade deadline where it's made the most sense for Carolina to deal their best player. And I think that's a very big red flag for the franchise. But he's a player who's very athletic, and I think he's added more strength this year. I don't know if it's a contract year thing or whatever, but he's playing better than I've ever seen him play. He's playing better against the run. I think he's more disruptive against the pass on a down-to-down basis. Usually it was more boom or bust with him. And he is one of the few players, I think there's only 2 or 3, that could change the fortunes of a playoff team. I'm interested to see which team you think could use him the most.
Well, okay. So he is one of those top players who could change the fortunes of a playoff team. That's not where I sent him, but I'm curious to have that conversation maybe at the end. Look, I'm in this for the bit, and I think the Rams should do it. They offered 2 firsts and a second for Brian Burns in 2022. You know, maybe knock one of the first rounders off of there because you lose one cheap year on the rookie contract now that he's on the 5th-year option. But come on, Les Snead doesn't want to make a first-round pick. Let's keep it going. They've been an overachieving young team this year. It seems like they are going to try to do a non-rebuild rebuild and build up a new core without truly tanking. But they've got to be thinking about who the anchors on that defense are going to be when Aaron Donald retires. Obviously, Brian Burns does not play the same role, but he is a star. He is someone who you can build and scheme a defense around. They could do it right now. He's owed like $9 million this year, so the last cheap year. Fuck them picks. It's the Rams way. And they love the player already.
I like this idea because like this would remind me of their Jalen Ramsey trade. Because when they traded for Jalen Ramsey, it was the year after the Super Bowl where things didn't go well. I don't think they made the playoffs that year. And when they made the trade, they were like 500. It was seen as a desperate move to kind of save their season. I think obviously being 500 now is different than being 500 the year after you won got to a Super Bowl. And you're a little bit more optimistic about this season than you were the 2019 season. But they are a fringe playoff team. So I think trading for Burns not only fills a hole, although I think like that defensive line is kind of good right now. But if you trade for Burns, it's really good. I think it pushes them into like a sure playoff team. So I do think it moves the needle a little bit for them. And they could beat some people. They played the Eagles really tough. I know they were at home.
They really could. And I do still think part of the stakes of right. And I do think still part of the stakes of this season, they're clearing this bar, but just keeping everybody happy, right? Keeping the vibes good. Sean McVay looked so depressed at the end of last year. The fact that it seems like everybody is having fun there is meaningful and will be meaningful as they go forward over the next few seasons and start to think about what they want to do after Stafford or what that future is like and just what the next chapter of Rams football is going to be. And having another star and a young star, having somebody who's part of the core there who doesn't, where you're not going, well, yeah, but I mean, he's thought about retiring twice now. I think that makes a difference. I think that moves the needle. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm, as I said, in this for the bit, because I think the Rams should try to never make a first round pick ever again. But again, they did try to work this trade, and you could do it a little bit more cheaply. Now, still expensive, but again, they don't care about the draft capital, so it's fine. I did also mark down the Ravens because I felt like I owed it to you to put a true contender on this list. And just in terms of the health struggles that they have had and losing guys, what an exciting thing it would be to add a player of Brian Burns' caliber to the Ravens. We love for good things to happen to the Ravens. I'm still holding out hope that they can get it together. The Rams, I think, are a playoff contender, but not a Super Bowl contender. So it would be also fun to see him go to a team that seems like it has a legitimate shot at winning the Super Bowl.
I think he could make the Ravens into a Super Bowl contender if they're not already. Like, I know the start to the season has been a little bit uneven, to say the least, but we see the bones of a really good team already. And I think
the start to the season has been uneven for a lot of these top teams.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the Jaguars are another team I would put on the list just because they could use some edge help. I know, Walker hasn't been the pass rusher they want him to be, but he's been a very good run defender. But there aren't like a lot of obvious landing spots for these defensive ends, and Burns isn't the only marquee name on the list. The next one is Danielle Hunter, who is also looking for more money, and I think he's actually a player that is seen as like one of these blue chip talents. So if he does get traded, I think the cost would be astronomical compared to some of these other guys. Would you be willing to give up a first for Danielle Hunter, and which team would that make the most sense for?
So, okay, would I be willing to give up a first? Maybe, probably. I send him to the Jaguars, who you mentioned in terms of Burns as well, because they definitely need that pass rush help. I think they would be better defensively if they could let Trayvon Walker kick inside a little bit more, play with his hand in the dirt a little bit more often. Burns would obviously help them do that. Hunter as well would help them do that. The thing with Hunter is that he would be owed a little over $6 million plus incentives for what is a half-year-long rental, because he's hitting free agency, and I believe he has a no franchise tag clause in his contract. So you either have to reach an extension between now and March, or you have to give something up where you're running the risk that it is truly just half a year. That is sort of why I like the Jaguars for it. And by the way, I mean, could you get him for a second and a third or something like that? I wonder if just the nature of the fact that it is literally a half-year rental and that's all you can guarantee yourself might bring the price down a little bit. But if I were the Jaguars, I probably would veer into first-round territory, because you have to go for it if you're Jacksonville. I think we've talked a lot about, like, they don't necessarily seem like a team that has a path to win the easy way. It's not perfect. They don't have as many weapons as they would like offensively. They don't have a totally balanced defense. But the more I think about it, this is the last year they've got before Trevor Lawrence is going to be making more than $55 million a year. They suddenly have the Texans in the division who look like they are only getting better. I don't know if this Jaguars team, in my heart of hearts, can win a Super Bowl, but I think the moment that they are in right now, they have to try. They have to go for it. So if you're Jacksonville and you're 24th in pass rush win rate, you have a secondary that's playing very well, that's getting a lot of takeaways, but are really struggling to get sacks. Hunter has 8 sacks as an individual. The Jaguars have 12 as a team right now. They're not getting very much pass rush outside of what Josh Allen is giving them. I think that's a team that should be incentivized to pay up a little bit and to go for it. And I lean Hunter over Burns because of the particulars of their situation, in that I think shelling out for something that will help them in the short term right now is pretty meaningful if you're Jacksonville.